Some absences don't echo until the moment you see the eyes you never expected to find, looking back at you. The first thing that hit Arlo Throne as he stepped out of the chauffeured SUV wasn't the cold. It was the silence of the snowfall. The Cascade Mountains wrapped themselves around the luxury resort like watchful giants, their peaks blanketed in December's quiet frost. The annual Winter Tech Gala was always held here, a polished affair filled with legacy investors, next-general coders, and magazine-ready billionaires. Arlo wasn't there to be seen. He was there because his board expected it, and if there was one thing Arlo Throne still mastered, it was giving people what they expected. The lobby glittered with designer coats and champagne flutes. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, warm amber lighting spilled across the white landscape. Christmas trees stood proud in every corner, trimmed in golds and silvers. Somewhere in the background, a live quartet played something mellow and forgettable. He gave the usual nods, shook the expected hands. Behind the curtain of tech ambition, these events had always felt hollow. It was all projection, curated philanthropy, digital power plays dressed as dinner parties. His assistant handed him the printed speech for his short address, but Arlo barely glanced at it. Every year, it was the same. Together, we code for change, invest in innovation, rewrite the future. He stepped onto the stage. Applause rose politely. He adjusted the mic, but his voice never made it out. Halfway into scanning the room for his opening remarks, he saw her. Across the ballroom, near the far end where servers refreshed hors d'oeuvres and reset wine glasses, she stood, not in heels or designer sequins, but in quiet black. An event uniform, maybe. Her hair pulled back, her shoulders strong. Her gaze not seeking attention, but holding her own dignity. Destiny, the maid who once filled his hollow mansion with quiet melodies and unshakable grace. The woman he hadn't seen, or thought he'd ever see again, in 5 long years. But it wasn't just her that stopped the air in his lungs. It was the little girl beside her, a child, 4, maybe 5, dressed in a red velvet dress with white trim. Her curls bounced as she turned to face the stage, and that's when it hit him. Those eyes, steel grey, sharp, thoughtful. His eyes. The world tilted. He forgot the mic, forgot the speech, forgot the curated reputation he wore like armor. He just stared, until a whisper cut through the frozen second from a man seated near the front. "Is that your daughter?" Arlo Throne didn't make decisions with emotion. He made them with precision. He had made his billions building software predicted outcomes, streamlining chaos into patterns, shaping messy data into elegant logic. He didn't believe in unpredictability, or fate, or consequences that couldn't be calculated in advance. Which is why, 5 years ago, when he ended things with Destiny, he thought that was the end. No paperwork, no drama, no mess, just closure by omission. She was never meant to be part of the long game, a housekeeper who sang gospel songs while wiping down stainless steel appliances. A woman who didn't care about his title, his money, or his polished routines. Destiny was warmth in a cold house. Too warm. She started asking questions no one else dared to. Like why he never celebrated holidays. Why his fridge was always full but his heart never was. Why his eyes always looked like they were chasing something just out of reach. That was when Arlo made the clean cut. Back when he still believed love could be outpaced if you simply moved fast enough. Tonight, as he stood frozen on stage, eyes locked with hers across a sea of tailored suits and digital royalty, he realized something terrifying. Sometimes it grows up, in someone else's arms, and it stares back at you with your own eyes. The girl in red didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just looked up at him, observed him, measured him, just like he used to do in every boardroom. Only this time, he was the one being evaluated. Before this Christmas story unfolds, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe, so YouTube knows you want more stories that speak to the heart. Arlo cleared his throat, but the words refused to follow. On paper, he had everything. He was the keynote speaker, the featured face on the gala's glossy brochure, the man who had just closed a $40 million round for a new AI-backed data system, the one whose name was whispered with awe in every investor's circle. But as his gaze held firm on that little girl's face, he felt stripped bare. For the first time in years, Arlo Throne had no idea what to say. He stepped off the stage without delivering his speech. His assistant trailed behind him, alarmed, whispering logistics and damage control. But Arlo didn't stop until he reached the back of the room. The crowd faded. The cameras lost interest. It was just her, now. Destiny. She was handing off a tray of hors d'oeuvres to another server, pretending not to notice him. But her hands were steady, her spine straight. Arlo paused a few feet away. He noticed the subtle changes, softer lines near her eyes, a grace in her posture that hadn't been there before. She looked like someone who had survived something quietly, someone who had learned to stand taller without shouting for attention. The child tugged at Destiny's dress. Destiny turned, and her eyes finally met his. No anger, no surprise, just clarity. Arlo's chest tightened. That girl wasn't just someone's child, she was his. Every barrier he'd built, every defense of logic, status, or pride collapsed in that moment. Because no amount of controlled detachment could rewrite what his eyes were telling him. He hadn't just abandoned a woman, he'd abandoned a daughter. Later that night, the gala softened into background noise. Guests drifted toward dessert stations and quiet conversations. Snow pressed gently against the tall windows, and the mountain resort settled into a calmer rhythm, the kind that made truth harder to avoid. Arlo found himself near the fireplace, staring into the slow movement of the flames, replaying the moment over and over. The eyes, the resemblance, the certainty he could no longer deny. He heard footsteps before he turned. Destiny stood a few feet away, her coat wrapped neatly around her shoulders. The little girl, Amma, sat nearby on a plush rug, focused on coloring with a crayon set someone had handed her earlier. Destiny didn't rush the moment. She never had. "I figured this conversation would come," she said quietly, "just not like this." "I know," Destiny replied. Not harsh, not gentle, just honest. They stood in silence for a few seconds, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled. Then Destiny spoke again. "You left without a word," she said. "No explanation, no goodbye. I went home thinking I'd imagined what we had." Arlo opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no defense that didn't sound thin. "I found out 2 weeks later," she continued, "about the pregnancy." The word landed between them with weight. "I didn't call. I didn't show up at your office. I didn't ask for help." Her eyes stayed steady on his. "Not because I was proud, but because I understood who you were back then." Arlo's voice came out strained. "I wasn't ready." "I know," she said again. "That's why I carried it alone." She glanced toward Amma, who was humming softly to herself, coloring carefully inside the lines. "She's named Amma," Destiny said. "It means grace." Arlo looked at his daughter, and felt something inside him shift permanently. "I never wanted her to grow up thinking she wasn't wanted," Destiny continued. "So I told her the truth, just not all of it. I told her she was born from love, even if love didn't know how to stay." Amma looked up then, noticing the attention. "Mummy?" she asked, pointing her crayon toward Arlo. "Why is he looking at me like that?" The question caught him off guard. Arlo knelt instinctively, bringing himself to her level. "Because," he said softly, choosing every word with care, "sometimes you meet someone, and you realize they're part of you in ways you didn't expect." Amma studied him for a moment, then smiled, small, curious, unafraid. Destiny watched it all without stepping in. This wasn't a moment she needed to control. Destiny met his gaze. "This isn't about fixing the past," she said. "It's about what you choose now." The fire cracked quietly. Outside, snow continued to fall. And for the first time in years, Arlo Throne understood something his success had never taught him. Some truths don't arrive when you're ready. They arrive when it's time to grow. At 36, Arlo Throne's life moved like code, precise, calculated, and always optimized. His Seattle estate sat high on the hill, encased in glass and brushed steel. To the world, it was architectural brilliance. But to Arlo, it was something else entirely, proof that order could be art. No clutter, no chaos, no emotional distractions. Every morning was identical. Wake at 4:45 a.m., run 3 miles on the indoor track, protein shake, market scan, CEO briefings by 7, back-to-back calls until 1. Silent lunches, late-night system strategy reviews, socials only when necessary, scripted and managed. His employees respected him. His investors adored him. But no one knew him. Even his kitchen lights responded to voice command, programmed to avoid unnecessary flickers. Arlo preferred it that way. Clean lines, clean exits, clean decisions. But beneath the symmetry of his world was silence, an echo he never named. For years, Arlo dismissed it as the cost of success. He told himself emotional clutter was for amateurs, that intimacy was a luxury best left for people who weren't building empires. Still, at night, when the servers stopped pinging, when the spreadsheets quieted, there were moments he caught himself standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, wondering what all of it really added up to. And into that space, 5 years ago, walked Destiny. She didn't come with drama. She came with dusters and order forms. She wasn't chaos, but she was something else entirely. She was hired through a staffing agency, Arlo barely remembered the name, during a corporate expansion phase. At the time, his estate had grown larger than he occupied, and things needed maintaining. The agency sent over someone efficient and discreet. They sent Destiny Banks. She was in her late 20s, with calm energy and quiet presence. Born and raised in Tacoma, Destiny had moved to Seattle for stability. Her grandmother had always taught her, wherever you work, bring dignity with you. Even if it's borrowed space. Destiny was all dignity. She wore plain clothes but moved like someone who once walked on bigger stages. Her playlists were old R&B and Sunday morning gospel. She folded towels with grace and ironed shirts like prayers. She didn't flinch when Arlo walked past. She greeted him, not like a man of wealth, but like a person. And somehow, that got under his skin more than any boardroom attack ever had. Arlo started noticing things he'd never seen before, how she hummed lowly while sweeping near the spiral staircase, how she adjusted the books on his shelf without ever judging the titles, how she asked about his coffee once, not because it was her job, but because she cared if he was sleeping. She had questions in her eyes but never imposed them. He caught her once, in the middle of wiping the counter, pausing as if lost in thought. "You all right?" he asked, surprising even himself. She blinked, then smiled. "Just thinking about my grandma's pecan pie." Arlo said nothing, but that night he ordered 2 pies. They sat in the fridge for 3 days before she said thank you. They weren't friends, but they also weren't strangers. It started with late-night tea. Arlo had come downstairs one evening after a particularly brutal week. IPO paperwork, 3 partner disagreements, and a sudden health scare in a regional office. He wasn't sleeping. He barely remembered the last time he sat in his own kitchen just to breathe. Destiny was there, washing out the kettle. She moved to leave when she saw him, but he waved her back. "You can stay," he muttered. "If you want." She didn't sit right away, but eventually she poured 2 cups. They talked about tea. That led to a short story about her grandmother's porch conversations. That turned into memories about music and childhood, books they'd read once but never told anyone. Arlo confessed he hadn't been to church since his parents' funeral. Destiny said her faith had shifted, not vanished. The conversations became habit. Once a week, then twice, always in the kitchen. But the air changed. Destiny challenged him without raising her voice. When he said, "Some people just aren't built for balance," she asked, "Or maybe you're scared of the cost." When he said, "Power protects," she asked, "From what?" No one had ever asked him what he was hiding from. One night, a storm rolled through the city, shaking the glass edges of the house. The lights flickered. Destiny lit candles without asking. The warmth made the house feel real for once. They sat on opposite stools. She told him she liked silence. Real silence. Not the kind that people pretend means strength. He didn't kiss her. She didn't lean in. But something passed between them that couldn't be categorized. They didn't call it anything, but both of them knew whatever it was, it mattered. It didn't end because they fought. It ended because Arlo panicked. A week after someone on his legal team made a joke, something vague about how domestic staff can get attached, Arlo felt the walls of his carefully curated image closing in. He convinced himself he was reckless, that having Destiny around blurred lines, that if investors found out, it would turn into a story. That empathy made him vulnerable. That desire made him weak. So he did what he had always done when control slipped. He cut ties. He emailed the agency, said the role was no longer necessary, offered a severance package with a non-disclosure clause. He didn't tell her in person. Destiny arrived one Monday morning to find her badge access revoked and a check waiting in an envelope. She didn't beg. She didn't ask why. She left with her dignity intact. But she cried the entire ride home. Back inside his sterile home, Arlo stood at the kitchen island that used to carry 2 teacups, and said nothing. Because in his world, the right thing wasn't always the kind thing. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself she would understand. He told himself emotions pass. But some decisions don't just pass, they echo. The rain that Saturday came in waves, thick, cold, and steady like the weight Destiny couldn't name pressing on her chest. She hadn't left the studio apartment all day. The silence felt heavier than usual, wrapping itself around her like a question she didn't know how to ask. The envelope sat untouched on the table, the pharmacy receipt folded inside it. She had picked up the test 2 days ago. At first, she'd convinced herself she didn't need it. Maybe it was stress, or a shift in schedule, or her body resetting after a few emotional weeks. But when she'd passed her reflection that morning and saw how tired her eyes looked, how full her chest felt, she couldn't pretend anymore. She sat on the edge of her mattress, holding the small box in one hand and her courage in the other. The bathroom was cold. She didn't turn on the overhead light, only the side mirror glow. Her hands trembled as she followed the instructions. 5 minutes. That's what the package said. She couldn't even look at the strip right away. Instead, she sat on the floor, knees pulled into her chest, trying to remember the last time she felt certain about anything. She thought of Arlo, of how he hadn't said goodbye, of how clean his goodbye had been, even in its silence. But this moment wasn't about him. This was about her, and what she would do now. The timer buzzed on her phone. She didn't need to look. She already knew. But still, when she saw the result, 2 sharp, undeniable lines, Destiny gasped. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry from panic. She cried because in that moment she felt both fear and grace, one life growing inside her. "Baby, come home," her grandmother said, before Destiny could even finish explaining. Tacoma wasn't far, but it felt like another world, slower, warmer, softer. The minute Destiny stepped off the bus, wrapped in an oversized coat and carrying the weight of a new truth, her grandmother was already waiting at the stop. They didn't talk much on the walk back. Her grandmother just slipped an arm through hers, held her close and whispered, "You're not alone, child." Not for a second. That first week back, Destiny didn't do much. She sat on the porch, sipped herbal tea, and stared at the sky. The quiet wasn't empty like it had been in the city. Here, it felt healing. Her old neighborhood hadn't changed. Neighbors still waved. Church aunties still dropped by with sweet potato pie just because. The kids played football in the street. Someone still blasted Marvin Gaye from a cracked speaker every Sunday afternoon. Word got around quickly that Destiny was back, and expecting. But no one asked her for the father's name. They just asked how she was feeling, what she needed, whether she'd be at church on Sunday. That was the beauty of where she came from. They didn't make pain public. They just wrapped you in prayer. Her grandmother set up the back room with a crib from someone down the block and donated baby clothes that still smelled like lavender. They painted the walls soft yellow, even though they didn't know the baby's gender. "You don't paint for a boy or a girl," her grandmother said. "You paint for peace." And Destiny, for the first time in a long time, started to breathe again. The birth came on a cool April evening, a Saturday. Destiny remembered because the church bells had rung that morning, and she'd smiled, saying, "My baby wants to come on the Lord's Day." It wasn't an easy delivery. There were long hours of silence between contractions, then rapid urgency. But Destiny never lost her calm. She focused on breathing, on grounding herself, on remembering every scripture her grandmother had whispered in her ear over the last few months. And when the baby finally arrived, the room fell still. A girl, 10 perfect fingers, 10 tiny toes, a slow blink of wide grey eyes. Those eyes. Destiny knew right then. There was no denying it. The child she held had Arlo Throne's eyes. She rocked the baby gently, humming one of her old workday tunes, soft, low, loving. Her grandmother came in an hour later, sat beside her and said, "She's a gift." "I know," Destiny whispered. "That's why I'm naming her Ama." Her grandmother smiled in recognition. "It means grace," Destiny explained. "Born on a Saturday. Given without request." From that moment, the name stuck. Ama Grace Banks, born of a love that didn't know how to stay, raised by a woman who did. Destiny didn't call Arlo, didn't mail a letter, didn't chase a man who walked away from the one thing he never knew he'd left behind. She had someone new to chase now. A purpose wrapped in a cotton blanket. Destiny never told Ama lies. She also never gave her names she wasn't ready to explain. When Ama started forming full sentences and asking curious questions, Destiny answered with care and honesty. "Do I have a daddy?" Ama once asked, while braiding her doll's hair. "Yes," Destiny said, "everyone has one. But sometimes people don't stay. It doesn't mean they didn't care. It just means they didn't know how to show it." Ama blinked, accepting it with the wide wisdom only children hold. Was I a surprise? She asked another time. Destiny smiled. You were a miracle. She didn't carry bitterness. Not in her home, not in her spirit. She refused to let pain become Alma's inheritance. Instead, she taught her daughter how to read by age 4. Took her to the community library every Saturday. They joined a choir, helped at food drives, danced in the kitchen to gospel classics. Their life wasn't easy, but it was honest. Destiny worked 2 jobs, one at the daycare. Maid attended during the day, another cleaning offices downtown at night. Her grandmother watched Alma when Destiny couldn't, always ready with sweet cornbread and bedtime stories. Together, they made a home where love didn't need to be loud, where truth wasn't a burden, where joy lived in small things. And every night before bed, Destiny would say the same words to Alma. You were born from love, even if love didn't know how to stay. The mountain resort wasn't Arlo's idea. His team insisted on appearances. Every December, the same dance played out. A luxury tech charity event in Washington's snow-covered Cascades. It was all cameras, elbow rubs, and high-net-worth networking, packaged with holiday music and icy hors d'oeuvres. Arlo arrived in a private SUV, stepping out into the sharp cold with a face that never revealed exhaustion. He wore charcoal grey and cashmere, nothing festive, nothing too human. The world saw him as calm, controlled, complete. But inside, he was tired, tired of smiling on command, tired of hearing words like genius and visionary while his chest echoed hollow. This gala marked 5 years since the company hit global scale. 5 years since his face started appearing in Forbes, Fortune, and Fast Tech Weekly. 5 years since he dismissed the one woman who ever made his house feel like a home. He rarely thought of Destiny anymore, not because she didn't matter, but because the guilt sat too deep. And guilt for Arlo was like a loose wire he refused to touch. Now, as he entered the Grand Lodge decked with silver garlands and glowing string lights, his gaze scanned the space mechanically. This place didn't feel festive. It felt staged, curated like a product launch. Music floated from a nearby string quartet. Waitstaff moved like clockwork. Board members raised glasses to a year of disruption. But Arlo? He felt more disconnected than ever, not from his work, from himself. He walked past the open ballroom, paused near a window overlooking a frozen lake, and exhaled deeply. His breath fogged the glass. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt empty. Destiny had no plans to be seen. The part-time holiday work came through a friend at church. She didn't need it. Her cleaning contracts and after-hours bookkeeping paid the bills, but extra money meant extra security. And Alma had been asking about ballet classes lately. The gala wasn't her scene, but she showed up on time, tied her apron tight, and followed instructions. Avoid eye contact. Don't linger. Keep trays full and movements efficient. Destiny didn't mind. She knew how to be invisible when the world required it, but she also knew how to remain unshakably present. That night, she moved quietly between the crowd, refilling glasses and passing canapes with a calm grace. She heard bits of conversation about market caps and venture trends, the same jargon that used to play in the background of Arlo's voice when she dusted his bookshelf years ago. She hadn't expected to see him here. In fact, she'd nearly turned around when she saw his name printed on the event schedule in the back hallway. But turning away hadn't raised her daughter. Turning forward had. Alma stood by the catering entrance, holding Destiny's phone and watching cartoons with soundless fascination. One of the staff had offered to keep her company during the shift. Destiny hesitated but agreed. Alma was bright, curious, and friendly with most people. Besides, Destiny had explained the rules. Stay where I can see you, no wandering, and no extra desserts. Alma had nodded with exaggerated seriousness. Yes, Mama. Destiny smiled now as she caught a glimpse of her daughter sitting patiently, swinging her feet from the bench. She looked older than 4 in moments like this, so aware, so calm, so much like her father, though Destiny never said that out loud. She shifted her tray to her left hand and stepped toward the ballroom. Her plan was simple: work her hours, collect her check, and go home before anyone important noticed she was ever there. She didn't know the moment had already begun. Arlo's attention was broken by motion, barely noticeable at first, just a small child walking across the back of the ballroom near the dessert station. She was wearing a red velvet dress, white stockings, and shiny shoes. Her hair bounced in soft curls as she turned. Something about the moment made him look twice. He froze. The child turned again, and this time their eyes met. Steel grey, not just grey, his grey. A chill sliced through him sharper than the mountain wind. She tilted her head slightly, curious, like she was trying to figure him out. That's when Destiny stepped into the frame, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. Arlo's chest tightened. The breath he took didn't go in fully. His vision narrowed, but not from panic, from recognition. He knew those eyes. Not just the girl's, but Destiny's. Even after 5 years he knew her walk, her posture, the quiet command she carried even in stillness. He stepped forward instinctively, forgetting the people around him, the obligations, the conversations he was supposed to have. Destiny turned then, catching his stare. Their eyes locked. No one else in the room mattered in that second. The string quartet played on. A server passed between them. The world kept moving. But Arlo... He stood completely still. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. There was no malice in her gaze. And the little girl beside her, her small hand reached for Destiny's again. Arlo's throat tightened, because deep down, beneath the logic and denial and years of polished routine, he already knew. Arlo didn't follow them right away. He needed a moment, not to process, he'd already done that the second he saw the girl, but to breathe in the new reality. She was his. There was no DNA test needed, no timeline to check. He knew the shape of those eyes, because they stared back at him every morning in the mirror. Later that evening, as guests dispersed into smaller conversations and the piano replaced the quartet, he stepped out into the hallway near the fireplace lounge. Destiny was there, coat folded over her arm, Amma nestled quietly at her side. Destiny noticed him, but she didn't move. Arlo stood a few feet away, hands at his sides. "Hi," he said. It came out uneven. "Hello," Destiny replied. Amma looked up at her mother. "Is he your friend?" Destiny knelt. "This is someone I used to know, baby." Amma stared up at him with a cautious tilt of her head. "You look like me." Arlo smiled, knees weakening slightly. "I was just thinking the same thing." Destiny stood, nodding toward the side room. "We can talk." But not in the hallway. He followed her to the quieter space near the back fireplace. It smelled faintly of cedar and citrus. No one else was around. They sat on opposite sides of the coffee table. Arlo took a moment before speaking. "I didn't know." "I know," Destiny said. "I would have—" She gently raised her hand. "Don't make promises in hindsight." "She's incredible," he said. "She is—" Silence again. And then Destiny added, with calm resolve, "I didn't come here tonight expecting anything, but maybe—" It was time. Time for what? Arlo didn't know yet. But as he looked over at the child still humming softly to herself and the woman he'd once let go not out of malice but fear, he understood one thing with certainty. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about what he would do next. The fire in the stone hearth crackled gently, casting flickers of amber light across the lounges, leather chairs, and polished wood beams. Outside, snow drifted in slow swirls against the tall windows. Inside, silence hung between them, heavy but not hostile. Destiny sat upright, hands folded in her lap, her voice steady despite the ache building behind her ribs. "I didn't come here expecting you," she began, eyes fixed on the fire instead of him. But maybe that's why this moment had to happen now. Not planned, not filtered, just here. Arlo sat across from her, elbows on his knees, gaze unwavering. He didn't interrupt. For once he didn't have answers. "When I left your house," she continued, "I told myself it was done. That whatever it was between us, whatever started over late-night tea and conversations that felt too fragile to name, had ended the moment my keycard stopped working." He winced. "I didn't cry in front of you. I didn't beg. That wasn't my way. But I cried the whole way home. I cried so hard I had to get off the bus 2 stops early." Arlo leaned forward slightly, shame tightening around his throat. Destiny looked at him then, meeting his eyes. "And 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant." The words didn't explode. They settled, like a stone dropped into still water. Arlo exhaled but still said nothing. "I didn't tell you," she went on, not defensive, not blaming, just honest, because I knew the man you were back then, focused, controlled, afraid of anything that couldn't be calculated. You thought emotions were distractions. You didn't see people. You saw risk. He opened his mouth, but she gently lifted a hand. "I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because I had to accept it. I had to let go of the idea that you'd show up just because biology said you should." Destiny glanced down at her hands. "I carried that pregnancy alone. Not because I had to, but because I needed to build a life where she wasn't waiting on someone who might never come. The fire popped. Arlo's throat was dry. He felt like a man being handed a truth too large to hold all at once. She, he finally managed. Destiny nodded slowly. Amma. Her name means grace. She was born on a Saturday morning with your exact eyes. The air shifted then, charged with realization. Destiny didn't cry. She didn't need to. She had already done her crying. This was just her telling the story she never got to tell. Arlo ran his hand over his face, fingers pressing into his temple like they could undo time. I didn't know, he whispered. I really didn't know. Destiny nodded. I believe you. He let that settle, grateful she didn't accuse him of lying. But even if I had known, he added quietly, I don't think I would have done the right thing. Not then. He leaned back in the chair, eyes distant, jaw tense. I was afraid. I was successful, respected, but I was empty. I convinced myself that meant I was safe, that as long as I kept control, I couldn't be broken. He looked at her now, eyes red at the edges. You didn't break me, but what I felt with you terrified me. Destiny didn't flinch. She let him speak. I remember the first night we talked in the kitchen. You poured that tea like it was sacred. You sat across from me like you weren't impressed, but you were present. That shook me more than any market crash ever could. He laughed softly, bitter and sad all at once. I'd never been in a room with someone who didn't want anything from me. You didn't want my title. You didn't even want my time. But I gave it to you anyway. His voice grew thick. So when I started caring, I panicked. Because in my world, caring costs. And people who care get hurt. He exhaled hard. So I did what I was trained to do. I protected the asset, the image, the machine. Destiny studied him. And what did it cost you? His answer came without hesitation. Peace. He looked at her fully now. For 5 years I convinced myself you probably moved on, that maybe you found someone better, but every December I'd find myself looking for warmth in all the wrong places, wondering why no fire ever stayed lit. Destiny's face softened, but her shoulders remained strong. You weren't ready then, she said. No, Arlo agreed, but I am now. Silence. Then she replied, That's not something you say once, it's something you live. Arlo nodded slowly. I'm not asking for a second chance, he said. I'm asking for a first one, with her. From the other side of the room, Amma had been quietly stacking small wooden coasters into a tower. Her humming had faded as she began watching her mother and the man with the same eyes. She walked over slowly, holding her stuffed animal tight. Mummy? She asked, standing by Destiny's side. Yes, baby? Why does he look at me like that? The room stilled again. Destiny didn't answer right away. She looked at Arlo, silently passing the moment to him. Arlo swallowed, bent slightly to Amma's height. He crouched slowly, making sure not to move too fast. His heart pounded, unsure of what to say, but knowing he had to say something. He didn't want to scare her, didn't want to confuse her. But this child, his child, was asking a question he'd waited his whole life to answer without even knowing it. He met her eyes gently. I guess, he said, voice low and trembling, it's because I've been looking for something important for a very long time, and I didn't even know it. Amma tilted her head. Like a treasure hunt? Arlo chuckled softly, surprised by the innocence. Kind of, he said. And when I saw you, it felt like... I found it. She blinked, thought for a moment. Do you know my name? I do now, he smiled. Amma, she smiled shyly, looking to her mother for approval. Destiny nodded once. Just once. Amma looked back at Arlo. Do you like animals? He smiled wider. I do. I have a turtle named Sugar. She doesn't do much, but she's my best friend. I'd love to meet Sugar sometime. Amma grinned, then looked at her mother again. Can he have Coco with us later? Destiny's brows lifted, caught off guard by the request. I don't see why not, she said slowly. Arlo looked between them, his daughter, his past, and possibly his future. This wasn't forgiveness, this was a beginning. And it started with a child's question. They sat around a small table near the guest lounge later that night. A staff member brought hot cocoa, and Amma stirred hers with a candy cane before handing it to Arlo. He took it with a soft smile. Thanks, partner. Destiny sat nearby, still watching, but less guarded now. More observing than shielding. Arlo turned to Amma. Can I tell you something? She nodded with the seriousness only small children master. When I look at you, I see myself. She tilted her head. Like a mirror? Yes, but not just on the outside. He pointed gently to his chest. Here too. In the way you're curious. in how you ask big questions, in how you watch before you speak. He smiled. She's right. Arma leaned in. Do you like marshmallows? Arlo nodded. 3. No more, no less. Me too. Destiny smiled softly into her cup. In that small, simple moment, the wall that Arlo had spent years building finally cracked open. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't pitching. He wasn't protecting anything. He was just present. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small item he'd bought earlier from the gift shop, a snow globe with a tiny wooden cabin inside. He handed it to Arma. Something to remember tonight by, he said. She shook it gently, watching the flakes swirl. Destiny watched them both, her daughter smiling, and the man she once knew, now looking like someone learning how to show up. This wasn't closure. It was the beginning of something else, something spoken now, even if it hadn't been before. Arlo hadn't planned on staying past the gala. Originally, he was scheduled to fly back to Seattle the next morning. Press interviews, board meetings, holiday press kits waiting for his approval. But after that night, after Arma's cocoa invitation and Destiny's guarded nod, he made a quiet decision. He extended his room without telling anyone. For the first time in years, he ignored his calendar. He let the world run without him. That next morning, he didn't knock on their door or force a conversation. He simply stayed in the background, observing, listening, being present. Destiny's schedule was quiet, but intentional. She woke early, got Arma ready, and prepped their simple breakfast in the kitchenette that the staff had let her use during the event week. Arlo waited until they'd finished before he entered the lounge area with coffee in hand, offering no pressure, just quiet greetings. Arma greeted him like it was normal. "Morning, Mr. Arlo," she said cheerfully, wearing a sweater too big for her but a smile too bright to ignore. He smiled back. "Morning, Arma." Destiny kept her responses neutral. Polite, but she didn't shut him out. The days moved like this, slow, delicate, unspoken. Arlo joined them for walks outside the lodge. Sometimes he watched as Arma built snow angels or chased birds, her tiny boots kicking up white powder while her laughter cut through the frozen air like sunlight. He didn't try to lead. He didn't overstay. He just stayed. Each day taught him something new. How Destiny folded Arma's mittens in her coat pockets. How Arma always gave names to birds and trees. How they moved together like two parts of the same soul. By the third day, Arlo found himself waking up before the alarm, not for meetings or emails, but for them. Arlo never imagined bedtime stories would feel like boardroom negotiations. It started when Arma asked if he could read her one book, just one, while Destiny finished folding laundry across the room. He agreed, thinking it would be quick. But Arma had her own system. He had to do the voices. And when he skipped a sentence, she caught him. "You missed the part where the bear said, 'Oops.' That's the funny part." Arlo smiled, then flipped back and read it again, exaggerated and committed. Destiny watched from the corner, her lips fighting a smile. Later that evening, during dinner, he didn't sit at the table at first. But Arma insisted, pulling up a third chair with determination. "I saved you a spot." He served himself modestly and followed their rhythm. Grace before meals, water instead of wine, and dinner questions that Arma asked like clockwork. "What made you smile today?" He hesitated, then looked at her. This moment, Destiny kept her eyes on her plate but said quietly, "She always asks that." "It's a good habit," Arlo replied. After the dishes were washed, Arlo didn't rush back to his room. He stayed a while longer, sitting on the couch while Arma worked on a coloring sheet. He didn't pull out his phone, he didn't open his laptop, he listened, to Destiny humming softly, to Arma narrating her drawing, to the rhythm of a life he never thought he'd crave, quiet, messy, human. Hope. Not a fantasy kind, the kind that shows up slowly after you've finally stopped running. On the fourth night, after Arma had fallen asleep wrapped in her turtle-printed blanket, Arlo lingered near the fireplace while Destiny cleaned up the remains of dinner. "I want to thank you," he said gently, "for letting me be here. Even a little." Destiny glanced over, then returned to wiping down the counter. "You're here," she said. "But being here doesn't undo what wasn't done." The words weren't sharp, they were honest. "I know," Arlo said. She paused. "Do you?" He turned toward her, the glow of the fire outlining the fatigue in his face, not from lack of sleep, but from decades of avoidance. "I used to think presence was enough," he said, "that showing up could fix what staying away broke." Destiny set the dish towel down. "Presence matters," she replied. "But it's not a pass." Arlo nodded slowly. I'm not asking to rewrite history. I just want to earn a future, even if it's piece by piece. Destiny studied him for a long moment. You don't get to walk in and decide what healing looks like, she said softly. Amma is a child, but I'm not. I remember what it felt like to be erased. I carried her through it. I smiled through it. I rebuilt through it. He listened, heart heavy but open. I'm not angry, she added, but I'm also not naive. You're here now. Good. But that doesn't mean you're staying for good. That takes more than cocoa and colouring books. Arlo stepped back, absorbing every word. I understand. Destiny turned off the sink, dried her hands, and said the last part gently. Love, with boundaries, isn't rejection, it's protection. And that was the first time Arlo realized she wasn't punishing him. She was protecting the world she built when he didn't show up, a world he was now trying carefully to be invited into. The next morning, Arlo arrived early to the lodge breakfast space. He hadn't expected Amma to be up yet, but she came bouncing in, hoodie half-zipped, holding a paper in her hand. I made something, she announced. He stood from the table, grinning. What is it? She unfolded the paper dramatically. It was a drawing, lopsided but colourful. 3 figures, one with big curly hair and a purple dress, Destiny, one smaller, holding a plush turtle, Amma, Mr. Arlo. His breath caught. You drew me? He asked. She nodded proudly. You have long arms because you reach stuff for me, and you like my marshmallows. Destiny entered then, pausing when she saw the drawing. Amma turned to her. Mama, can we put this one on the fridge? Destiny hesitated, then smiled gently. Yes, baby. She took a magnet from the side and pinned it next to Amma's snowflake art. Arlo stared at the fridge, speechless. It wasn't about being forgiven. It was about being real enough to exist in her world. Now. He had a crayon-coloured space beside them. He kneeled beside Amma, voice low. That's the best gift I've ever received, she beamed. You didn't even unwrap it, he laughed, pulling her gently into a side hug. Destiny stood quietly, arms folded, watching it all. She didn't rush to explain the meaning. She didn't interrupt the moment, because she knew children don't draw what isn't present. Arlo hadn't been to Tacoma since college. Back then, it was just another pin on a map, a place he passed through during tech expos or client meetings. He never imagined he'd return like this, following Destiny's old silver sedan through residential streets with speed bumps and basketball hoops at every corner. Amma sat in the back seat of Destiny's car, waving at him every few turns. Her hair was in 2 playful puffs, and she was excited to show him where the food is really good. When they pulled up to the small white house with navy shutters and a porch swing, Destiny parked and turned to him. This is my grandmother's house, she said simply. We're just visiting. She doesn't know you're coming. Arlo felt the nerves twist in his chest. Should I wait in the car? Destiny arched a brow. If you came to learn where we come from, you better come all the way. He nodded. The yard was clean, with flower pots by the steps and chalk drawings on the walkway. A barbecue grill smoked from the backyard, and voices floated around the house like music, laughter, praise, and someone shouting for more sweet tea. Destiny's grandmother was on the porch, in a rocking chair, shelling peas into a bowl. She looked up as they approached, her eyes sharp and her presence undeniable. Well, she said, her voice like slow honey, look what the wind brought back. Arlo extended his hand. Ma'am, I know who you are, she cut in, not unkindly. And I've got eyes. But what I don't have is time for talk that don't match footsteps. So, if you're here to mean something, mean it. Destiny didn't smile, but Arlo caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Respect, maybe. The day unfolded slowly, food being grilled, neighbors dropping by, kids playing tag. Arlo found himself sitting on the porch steps with a paper plate in his lap, listening to stories about the neighborhood, church fundraisers, and porch politics. He didn't speak much. He watched. He listened. And when Destiny's grandmother handed him a glass of peach tea, she said, You're quiet. That's not a bad start. That Sunday, Arlo woke early and ironed a collared shirt. He didn't ask if he was invited to church. Destiny didn't offer. But Amma had run up to him after breakfast, wide-eyed. We're going to sing today. You should come. He didn't say no. The church sat at the edge of the neighborhood, modest brick, white trim, with a sign out front that read truth in action, not just in word. Inside, the pews were packed. The choir was already warming up, and the smell of cologne, hairspray, and fresh-baked pastries from the fellowship hall lingered in the air. Arlo sat quietly next to Arma and Destiny. He stood when they stood, listened as the pastor preached about redemption being a door, but pride refusing to knock. The message didn't feel distant, it felt aimed. When the choir began, Arma sang from the children's section, loud and off-key but fearless. Destiny stood beside her, humming along, one hand gently swaying. Arlo watched them, not just with admiration but with yearning. This room was filled with people who had less than he did, but something inside him whispered that they also had more. After the service, Destiny introduced him to a few people. Some nodded stiffly, some looked curious, but one man, Deacon Leroy, said something Arlo didn't expect. "People forget," the old man said, "that showing up isn't about fixing anything. Sometimes it's just about not running again." Arlo shook his hand. "I'm learning." "You'd better," Leroy replied. "This woman you disappeared on?" She didn't crumble. She rooted deeper. As they walked back to the car, Arma slipped her hand into Arlo's. He looked down at her. She didn't speak. She just held on. And that small hand felt heavier than any billion-dollar deal he'd ever signed. Later that evening, back at the mountain lodge, Destiny sat on the bed folding laundry while Arma colored nearby. Arlo stood by the window, staring out at the snow-covered trees, gathering the courage to ask what had been building in him all day. Did I embarrass you?" he finally asked. Destiny didn't look up right away. "No," she said. "You were respectful, quiet, present." He turned toward her. "That's a good thing, right?" She met his gaze. "It's a start." Arlo nodded slowly, understanding more than he had weeks ago. "I've spent years believing that success meant proving people wrong," he said. "But your world, it's not about that. It's about proving people right. About showing up for those who believed in you before you were anything." Destiny listened. She always had that ability to let silence make space for honesty. "I want to be better," he added. "I know you do," she said. "But I need you to understand. I'm not watching what you say. I'm watching what you build." He walked toward the table and picked up one of Arma's drawings, a tree with two figures underneath. "She draws us now," he said softly. Destiny nodded. "She sees who shows up." He placed the drawing down, then sat across from her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight," he said. "I'm asking for time." Destiny folded the last shirt and stood. "Time is something we all get," she said. "It's what you do with it that tells me who you really are." Then she walked into the other room to check on Arma, leaving Arlo alone with the snow falling softly outside, and the weight of his own choices. The next morning, over toast and fruit, Arma looked up from her cereal bowl and asked a question that made both adults pause. "Can I visit your office someday, Mr. Arlo?" Destiny stiffened slightly, caught off guard. Arlo blinked. "You want to visit my office?" Arma nodded. Spoon paused mid-air. "Do you have a lot of computers?" "A few," he said, smiling. "Do you have toys there?" She gasped. "Do you have gummy bears?" "Only the red ones," he whispered. She laughed. "That's the best kind." Destiny glanced at Arlo across the table, her face unreadable but her eyes watchful. He understood the weight of the question. This wasn't about snacks or beanbags. This was about presence, about trust. Arma wasn't asking for a tour. She was asking if he was willing to show her his world, the one she'd unknowingly belonged to since birth. "I'd be honored to have you visit," he said. "Can Mommy come too?" He looked at Destiny. "If she wants to," Arma beamed. "Then it's a deal." She ran off to put on her boots for their walk outside. Destiny stood, taking her mug to the sink. "She asks innocent questions," she said. "They never feel innocent," Arlo replied. She didn't smile. She didn't promise anything. But she didn't shut him out either, and that, Arlo realized, was more than hope. It was possibility. Glass towers rose into cold skies. Electric cars lined the curbs. Inside Arlo's headquarters, the building buzzed with silent elevators, keycard doors, and people in business attire moving with mechanical purpose. But today wasn't routine. Today Arlo entered the lobby not alone, but with Destiny walking beside him and Arma bouncing at his side, gripping her little backpack and pointing at the plants near reception. The front desk assistant, Mia, blinked twice, clearly unsure if this was a dream or a PR stunt. "Mr. Throne," she said carefully, "we weren't expecting—" Destiny said nothing, offering a soft, neutral smile before adjusting Arma's scarf. They moved toward the private elevator. Arlo nodded to security, and the team didn't stop them. But heads turned. Whispers sparked. That was expected. In the executive suite upstairs, his assistant Dana stood from her desk, caught off guard by the sight of a child skipping toward the CEO's office. "New intern?" she asked with dry wit. Future Director of Imagination, Arlo replied. Destiny let out a quiet breath. She didn't need to be introduced. Her presence spoke volumes. They stepped into Arlo's office, sleek, cold, minimal. Amma paused. Where are the colors? She asked. Arlo blinked. What do you mean? No drawings, no pillows. It looks like the airport. Destiny chuckled under her breath. Arlo laughed too, because she was right. He got down on one knee. Want to help me fix that? Amma's eyes lit up. Can I draw you a sign? And just like that, the tone of the space shifted, not because of tech, but because a child walked in with truth no one could unsee. The boardroom was polished, glass walls, LED screens, tablets at each chair, and coffee brewed from beans more expensive than most groceries. Arlo sat at the head, like always, but this time Destiny and Amma were nearby, seated in the corner of the room near a low bench with Amma colouring quietly. He had informed the team. My daughter and her mother will be joining us today, not as guests, as witnesses. The room tensed. Some smiled politely, some blinked. But one director, Lawson, a man who had always lived on the edge of arrogance, cleared his throat as the meeting began and leaned toward another partner with a murmur too loud to be an accident. So, he brought his nanny? The silence that followed was sharp enough to pierce through the layered civility. Arlo didn't look up immediately. He flipped a page on the financial update, closed the folder. Then he stood. Destiny didn't react. Amma paused her drawing. Arlo's voice was even, too even. I want everyone in this room to hear me clearly, he said. That woman sitting over there is not a nanny. Lawson squirmed. She's the mother of my daughter, and the only reason I have a chance at becoming the kind of man my title pretends I already am. Silence deepened. She's not here for optics. She's not here because of charity. She's here because I invited her, because she's the one person in my life who never asked for anything and still gave everything. The entire boardroom froze in place. And if anyone here believes that her presence lowers the professionalism of this room, Arlo added, you're welcome to step out. Permanently. Lawson said nothing. Arlo turned to Amma. Is your picture ready yet? She beamed. Almost. The tension cracked, just enough for breath. Destiny met his eyes for the first time in the meeting, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't approval, but it was acknowledgement. After the meeting, Arlo didn't retreat to his office. Instead, he walked with Destiny and Amma through the open workspace, where employees typed, coded, or held standing huddles. Every step they took turned heads. Some were surprised. Others smiled with genuine curiosity. A young software engineer named Zoe stood and said softly, She looks just like you. Arlo glanced down at Amma and smiled. I think she's the upgrade, Amma whispered. That means I'm newer and better, right? Exactly. They stopped near the snack wall where Arlo bent down and opened a drawer full of gummy bears. Amma gasped. You weren't kidding. Destiny watched as Amma handed him 2 red ones. Only red. You said, he took them like a promise. They sat on a bench beside the window overlooking the city skyline. Destiny spoke quietly. I've never seen you defend anything outside of a business pitch. I wasn't defending, Arlo replied. I was just done being silent. Destiny turned her gaze toward the skyline. I won't mistake statements for transformation, she said. I don't expect you to, but I heard what you said, she added. And so did she. They looked over. Amma was scribbling intensely on her paper, tongue poking out in concentration. When she looked up, she said, I'm done. She held up the drawing proudly. The tech company's logo sat in the center, drawn in pink crayon, a little wobbly but still recognizable. Next to it stood 3 stick figures. One was labeled me, one said Mummy. The last, slightly taller, with glasses, was labeled Daddy. Destiny froze. Arlo blinked, his throat tightening. Can I hang it in your office? Amma asked, holding the drawing like it was sacred. He knelt in front of her. You can hang it wherever you want. She walked straight to the glass wall, where Arlo handed her a small magnet from the file cabinet. Together, they pressed the paper up just above the corner of his whiteboard. It wasn't part of the quarterly goals. It wasn't part of investor reports. But it was the most important thing in the room. Amma stepped back proudly, hands on her hips. Now your office isn't boring anymore. Destiny stood behind them, arms crossed loosely. She hadn't said a word yet. Arlo turned to her. Thank you for letting her come. She wanted to come. She sees something in this place. She sees something in you, Destiny said carefully. He nodded, the moment landing. She already does, Destiny said. Children see without needing resumes. It was simple, unpolished, perfect. This moment gave us chills. If Arlo just earned your respect, drop a comment. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next part. The argument didn't start loudly. It began with a look. Destiny noticed it first while they were back at the lodge that evening, Amma asleep in the adjoining room, with her turtle tucked under one arm. Arlo had been pacing slowly, phone in hand, rereading a message he hadn't responded to yet. What is it? Destiny asked, folding a blanket at the foot of the couch. He hesitated. PR wants a comment about today. Destiny stopped folding. A comment? She repeated. They noticed the board meeting footage, he said. Someone snapped a photo through the glass wall. It's already circulating. Her jaw tightened. And they want to shape the narrative, he said carefully. Something about leadership, accountability, fatherhood. Destiny turned fully toward him now. The word wasn't raised, it wasn't shouted. But it carried finality. I haven't agreed to anything, Arlo said quickly. I didn't even respond, but you considered it, she replied. He didn't deny it. Destiny took a slow breath, steadying herself. I need you to hear me clearly. Amma is not your redemption arc. Arlo's shoulders dropped slightly. I know. No, she said, stepping closer. You think you know. But I lived the consequences of being invisible. I won't let my daughter become a storyline. Not for your company. Not for your conscience. He met her gaze. I would never use her. Intent doesn't erase impact, Destiny replied. People will talk. They'll frame you as the man who learned late. They'll clap for growth that didn't carry the weight I did. Silence stretched. I didn't raise her so she could become proof that a powerful man finally did the right thing. Arlo swallowed. You're right. Destiny's voice softened, but her stance did not. If you want to be here, you do it quietly. Consistently, without cameras, without announcements. He nodded slowly. That's fair. No, she corrected. That's necessary. This wasn't a fight about public image. It was a boundary drawn by a woman who had already survived the hardest parts alone. Arlo sat down heavily in the armchair, rubbing his hands together as if warming them. I didn't come back to fix my image, he said after a long pause. I came because I missed something I never knew I needed. Destiny stayed standing, arms folded loosely, listening. For years I told myself that progress meant moving forward without looking back, he continued. But standing in that boardroom today, hearing someone reduce you to a label, I realized how often I let people do that before. I let them reduce you. I let them reduce me. He exhaled slowly. I don't want applause for showing up late. I want the work of staying. Destiny studied him, eyes sharp, searching for cracks in the words. I don't expect forgiveness, Arlo added. I expect accountability, and patience, and the chance to prove that this isn't temporary. She remained quiet. He stood and faced her, hands open. I'm not asking to rewrite anything. I'm asking to participate, to be present without needing credit. Destiny looked away, toward the hallway where Amma slept. Do you know what it's like, she asked quietly, to realize that the life you planned is gone, and no one is coming to help you rebuild it? Arlo shook his head. I didn't, she said. I learned. He nodded, accepting the weight. I want to learn too, he replied, even if it takes the rest of my life. She turned back to him. That's not a promise you make once, Destiny said. That's one you renew every day. Destiny didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. This wasn't about convincing her. It was about whether he could live what he was saying. They sat across from each other now, the room quiet except for the faint hum of heat through the vents. There's something you don't know, Destiny said finally. Arlo leaned forward. Tell me. The first year after Amma was born, she began. I didn't feel brave. I felt empty. I loved her deeply, but I was exhausted in ways sleep didn't fix. She paused, gathering herself. I'd wake up every night afraid I'd fail her, afraid I'd miss something important, afraid that if I stopped moving, everything would fall apart. Arlo listened without interrupting. There were days I didn't feel like myself, she continued. Days when the loneliness pressed in hard. No partner, no shared burden, just responsibility all the time. She looked at him. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. His jaw tightened. My grandmother helped, Destiny said. My church helped. But there were moments when it was just me and Amma in that small bedroom, and I had to choose strength because there was no alternative. Arlo's voice came out low. I'm sorry. I didn't tell you to make you feel guilty, she replied. I'm telling you because this is the foundation you're stepping onto. Not a clean slate, a life built under pressure. She exhaled. I learned courage quietly, without witnesses, without recognition. Arlo nodded, eyes glistening. You shouldn't have had to do that alone. But I did, she said, and it changed me. He looked at her with a depth she hadn't seen before, not admiration, respect. That strength, he said, is the reason I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to disrupt what you built. Destiny leaned back slightly. Then it wasn't dismissal, it was guidance. Arlo stood and walked toward his bag, pulling out a tablet. There's something I need to show you, he said. Destiny watched cautiously as he returned and placed it on the table between them. He tapped the screen, opened a secure banking app, and turned it toward her. Opened 5 years ago. Transfers made regularly, quietly, consistently. Her breath caught. What is this? A savings account, Arlo said. For my future child. She looked up sharply. I always planned for legacy, he continued. Education funds, trusts, long-term security. I didn't know who she would be. I didn't even know she existed. Destiny stared at the balance, stunned. But I knew one thing, he said. If I ever became a father, I didn't want my child to start behind. Her voice trembled. You've been contributing to this. For 5 years? Yes, and you never touched it? Not once, Arlo said. It wasn't mine to touch. Silence filled the room. I didn't know her name, he added quietly, but I always planned for her future. I just didn't know hers had already begun. Destiny closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. This doesn't erase the past, she said. I know, but it tells me something about you, she continued, about who you were trying to be, even when you failed. Arlo nodded. I failed at presence, not at intention. She met his gaze again. This stays private, Destiny said, for Amar, not for leverage. Agreed, he replied instantly. She slid the tablet back toward him. For the first time, Destiny said softly, I see the difference between regret and responsibility. Arlo exhaled, the tension easing just slightly. This wasn't healing, but it was honesty. And sometimes, honesty was the first thing success could never buy. The morning unfolded like a scene from a holiday card, snow drifting gently outside the kitchen window, the sky still soft with dawn. Arlo stood at the stove in Destiny's small kitchen, sleeves rolled up, apron tied crookedly over his designer shirt, flipping sweet potato pancakes with more determination than skill. A warm scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and turkey sausage filled the house. Destiny leaned against the doorway, her arms folded across her sweatshirt, silently observing him. Her heart wasn't racing, but it wasn't still either. He looked so out of place in her kitchen, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of out of place that oddly fit. Amma sat at the small table, colouring with her tongue slightly out the side of her mouth. I'm drawing a snow angel, she chirped, completely unaware of the tension that still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Extra syrup or regular? Arlo asked, half turning toward Destiny. His voice was gentle, unsure. Destiny didn't answer immediately. She was trying, really trying, not to read too much into things. She'd watched him try to win back time he never got, try to cook breakfast without burning the house down, try to be present, not perfect. Regular's fine, she finally replied, stepping forward and grabbing mugs from the cabinet. She handed him one. You're using too much oil, by the way. He grinned. Noted, Chef Destiny. She smirked, turning slightly so he wouldn't see the way his voice made her eyes glisten. He was trying, not for show, not for Instagram, just for her. For Amma. Still, the scars of the past weren't bandaged just because snow was falling and pancakes were warm. They sat down at the table, the three of them, with a kind of tentative peace that didn't have words yet, but it had presence. And hope. After breakfast and lots of syrup cleanup, Destiny brought out a small box wrapped in craft paper with Amma's name written in looping pink marker. No fancy bows, no shiny ribbon, just love and time. Can I open it now? Amma's eyes lit up. Go ahead, baby. Amma tore the paper gently, which surprised both Arlo and Destiny. Inside was a folded drawing of a little girl standing between a woman with curly hair and a man with messy brown hair. Above their heads were the words, My family tree has just 3. Arlo swallowed hard. I drew it, but Amma helped me pick the colours, Destiny said softly. Amma looked at her mother, then at Arlo. Mommy said even if the tree is small, the roots can still go deep. Arlo knelt beside her and handed her a small red velvet pouch. "What's this?" she asked, tugging the string loose. Inside was a handmade bracelet, a braided cord with a tiny charm shaped like the letter A, but there were two A's. Amma looked up, puzzled. "One is for you," Arlo explained, "and one's for the first letter of the woman who gave you life. I wanted something that reminds you you're always connected to both of us." Destiny's hand brushed against her lips. Amma giggled and slipped it on. "I love it, Daddy." That word hit Arlo like a piano chord, rich, unexpected, and haunting. He hadn't earned it yet, not fully. But Amma gave it freely. And Destiny didn't correct her. Later that morning, the three of them bundled up and headed across town to the senior center where Destiny's grandmother had recently moved after her health scare. Arlo carried a thermos of tea and a paper bag of cookies Amma insisted they bake. The moment they walked in, Grandma Ruth beamed. "Look at y'all, like a Christmas card." "Hi, Grandma." Amma ran up and hugged her. "Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, baby. Who's this tall man walking beside my grandbaby?" Amma didn't hesitate. She held Arlo's hand tightly and announced, "This is my dad." Arlo's heart stuttered. Ruth blinked. Destiny held her breath. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ruth smiled. A slow, wise smile that said she had lived enough life to recognize growth when she saw it. "Well," she said, "about time." Arlo laughed nervously. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm here to learn it. One Christmas at a time." They spent the afternoon listening to Ruth's stories, sipping tea, and watching Amma put on a little fashion walk with a Santa hat and her new bracelet. At some point, Ruth leaned over to Destiny and whispered, "He looks at her like she's the sunrise he's been waiting on. Just don't let him set unless he's ready to stay." Destiny nodded, eyes never leaving Arlo and Amma, who were laughing over spilled marshmallows. That night, back at the apartment, Destiny folded blankets on the couch while Arlo tucked Amma into bed. She could hear their whispers from down the hallway, little giggles, and the sound of a bedtime story Arlo made up on the spot. She didn't expect what came next. Arlo walked out quietly, shutting Amma's door halfway. He found her in the living room, standing near the small Christmas tree they'd put up last week. Her hands still held a folded blanket. He walked over and gently took the blanket from her. "Sit?" he asked, motioning to the couch. She hesitated, then sat. Arlo didn't sit beside her. He got on one knee. But there was no ring, no dramatic question, just a man who had once lost everything that mattered, now trying to do the opposite. "I'm not kneeling to propose," he said. "I'm kneeling because I've fallen short before, because I let pride, fear, and confusion rob me of years, but I'm not letting one more sunrise pass where I don't say what matters." Destiny's lips parted slightly, eyes already brimming. "I can't promise perfection," he said, "but I can promise consistency, patience, truth, and love. Not just for Amma, for you, Destiny, for what you built when I was absent, for who you are." She lowered her gaze, and for a second, tears trickled freely. He gently reached for her hand. "You don't have to say anything tonight, but I needed you to know, I'm not building a legacy anymore. I'm protecting one." Destiny finally nodded, her hand squeezing his. And in that quiet, snowy Christmas night, no grand gestures were needed, because not every promise needs a diamond. Some just need courage. The auditorium in Seattle hummed with anticipation. The air was thick with warmth, not from heat, but from the shared stories of womanhood, resilience, and rising. Women from every walk of life filled the seats, their eyes turned toward the modest stage where the final keynote speaker of the day stood quietly behind the curtain, hands clasped, breath steadying. Destiny had come far from the quiet girl who once kept her world behind locked doors. Now, with her natural curls in a low twist, a maroon blouse that mirrored the richness of her skin, and a quiet grace that drew admiration without effort, she exhaled and stepped into the light. She didn't need a grand entrance. She was the message. "I wasn't supposed to be here," Destiny began, her voice neither loud nor shaky, but firm, clear, and rooted, at least not by the world standards. The audience leaned in. Some already knew her story. Others had only read the headlines, "Ex of billionaire tech heir, opens literacy center for young mothers," or "From struggle to strength, Destiny's quiet revolution." "But here's the truth," she continued. "Motherhood didn't pause my life. It clarified it, Gasps and affirming hums rippled through the room. I used to believe success looked like silence, she said, like shrinking to fit in rooms where my voice wasn't welcome. But becoming Amma's mother didn't make me smaller, it made me whole. Every challenge, every lonely night, every morning I woke up with a crying baby and no idea how I was going to pay for her formula, it was teaching me something. She paused, lifting her chin slightly. It taught me that love isn't weakness, that purpose isn't something you chase, it's something you carry, sometimes in your arms, sometimes in your chest. Tears welled up in the eyes of women sitting front row. Some clutched notebooks, others, their hearts. Amma made me see the world through a lens of clarity. I used to want to be seen. Now, I want to serve. That's the difference. By the time she stepped down, destiny didn't need applause. But it came anyway, rising like a wave, washing over her as women stood and cheered. Some wept. Some stood in awe. But one thing was clear. Destiny hadn't just spoken to them. She had unlocked them. Across town in a crisp downtown conference room overlooking Lake Union, Arlo Reed stood in a charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled, as he addressed a smaller but equally attentive crowd of journalists, investors, and social advocates. Behind him was a simple banner, the AMA initiative, Advancing Mothers in Algorithms. Arlo cleared his throat. For a long time, I thought tech was just about disruption, breaking rules, moving fast, being first. But now I understand it's also about stewardship, about passing on the torch, not just coding it. Silence followed, the room hanging on his shift in tone. When I became a father, late and not in the way I imagined, I had to confront the version of myself that only invested in the obvious, the comfortable, the known. He turned toward the banner and continued. This fund is different. It's not about creating the next billion-dollar app. It's about giving women, especially mothers in underserved communities, the resources, mentorship, and backing they've always deserved. He paused, then added, with a smile that reached deeper than just PR, it's named after my daughter, Amma. Because if she's going to inherit this world, I want her to know it wasn't just built, it was made better. The room erupted in applause. But more than that, a new kind of energy took hold. Women who had never seen themselves in boardrooms saw themselves now, not as charity, but as change agents. And quietly, behind the scenes, Destiny had helped vet every applicant. Her fingerprints were on every pitch deck the fund would read. This wasn't Arlo playing savior, this was Arlo learning to follow. The classroom smelled like old chalk and hope. Destiny stood at the front of the Community Learning Center in Tacoma, the sleeves of her denim shirt rolled up, a whiteboard behind her, and 7 women seated with notebooks open, hearts wider than their resumes. Your story isn't your liability, Destiny said. It's your leverage. The women nodded. One raised her hand. But what if people only see the mistakes? Destiny smiled. Then you let your consistency rewrite the narrative. That line would live on long after the session. At the back, Arlo stood in silence, folding donated books, restocking the snack shelf, occasionally peeking toward the front. He wore no suit, just a hoodie and jeans, blending into the background like a shadow learning how to serve the sun. Destiny caught his glance once and nodded, acknowledging him, not with giddy romance but with the warm trust of someone who finally saw partnership without performance. Later, after class, one of the women asked, "Is that your husband?" Destiny chuckled. "That's Amma's father. Do you love him?" Destiny paused, packing up her things, before answering softly, "I love how he's learning to love." The Saturday farmers market in downtown Seattle buzzed with its usual blend of music, homemade soap vendors, and espresso stands. But what drew a few passing glances that morning wasn't the organic honey tent. It was Destiny and Arlo, hand in hand. No cameras, no bodyguards, no headlines. Just 2 people walking with a little girl between them, skipping every 3rd step, holding both their hands. "Daddy, can I have the peach one?" Amma asked, pointing at a popsicle stand. Arlo knelt. "You want to share with Mommy?" Amma nodded. They walked with their popsicles and no shame. No secrets. No pressure to define what they were at every moment. Later, on a bench near the water, Destiny leaned against Arlo's shoulder. "You ever think it would look like this?" she asked. "No," he said honestly, "but I never knew to hope for better than this." She nodded, laying her head back. They weren't rushing toward marriage or labels or photo ops. But they were walking, together, not hidden, not ashamed, just open to whatever came next. Destiny didn't have to fake the smile this year. The little house she once felt ashamed of now radiated with warmth, laughter, and a kind of love she'd never had the courage to believe she deserved. It wasn't decorated with store-bought perfection, but with paper stars Amma had cut out, glitter Amma insisted on spreading everywhere, and garlands of old holiday cards turned into a banner over the living room wall. It smelled like cinnamon apples and roasted yams. The same kitchen where she once cried while boiling noodles now echoed with the sound of Arlo humming as he carved up a honey-glazed ham. Amma, with socks too big and a Santa hat too small, zipped from room to room with her little camera, capturing every blurry moment. She labeled each snapshot, Christmas, the real one. The lights twinkled, though they were just battery-powered strands. The tree, hand-picked from a lot 2 weeks ago, leaned a little, but its ornaments were stories. Amma had painted tiny hearts on popsicle sticks. Destiny had tied red ribbons with handwritten affirmations. Arlo had folded paper cranes, one for each promise he made to stay, grow, and build. Neighbors stopped by with cornbread and homemade cider. A few of Destiny's students, who once only knew her as Miss J from Tacoma, dropped off Christmas cards with lines like, "You changed my life." Her mother's old neighbor, Miss Laverne, brought a box of sweet potato pie and wrapped hugs like a shawl. Destiny watched it all unfold from the couch, her hand resting gently over Arlo's. She wasn't hosting Christmas, she was living it, and this time it didn't cost her peace. The small church was packed more than usual. Snow flurried outside, dusting coats and clinging to boots. But inside there was warmth that had nothing to do with heat. Arlo shifted in his seat, nerves bouncing in his chest. Destiny leaned over and whispered, "She'll be fine. She asked for this." And she had. Amma had run to the pastor a week earlier with a printed-out YouTube chord sheet in one hand and a glitter-covered bookmark in the other. She said she wanted to sing. Not just for Christmas, but because, in her words, God brought my family back. Now, standing in front of the congregation in a simple white dress and patent leather shoes, Amma looked like the very definition of grace. She held the microphone too close at first, but when the pianist struck the opening chords of Joy Comes in the Morning, everything else faded. She sang with her eyes closed. No vibrato, no polished performance, just raw, honest joy. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. A few mothers in the pews wiped their eyes. One older man clapped offbeat but earnestly. Destiny clutched a tissue and held her breath through most of it. Arlo didn't even realize he was standing until the final note hit, and Amma bowed with a nervous giggle. She ran straight to them afterward, arms wide, yelling, "Did I do okay?" Destiny kissed her forehead. "Baby, you brought the whole room back to life." Arlo nodded, voice thick. "You didn't just sing the song. You became it." That night, after the church had emptied and Amma was asleep in her blanket fort in the living room, Destiny and Arlo sat on the back porch. The snow had quieted the world, making it feel like time paused just for them. Arlo handed her a mug of warm cocoa, whipped cream melting into the top. Destiny's fingers brushed his. She didn't pull away. He looked at her. No tension, no pride, no unspoken apologies left unsaid, just stillness. "Do you remember," he asked softly, "that first morning we ran into each other again?" Destiny laughed. "Which one?" "You mean the morning you wore a scarf like a lost European traveler in a rainstorm?" He chuckled, head tilted. "That one." They sat in that silence, remembering the pain, the growth, and the journey between who they were and who they had become. Destiny rested her head on his shoulder. "I don't want a perfect ending, Arlo. I just want a real one." He turned, gently tipping her chin until their eyes met. No more hiding, no more escaping, just us, real. And with no spotlight, no grand gesture, and no audience, he leaned in and kissed her. Slow, reverent, certain. It wasn't the first time, but it was the first time it felt like home. The next morning, Amma sprinted into their room holding up another drawing. Look, I drew us." Destiny blinked sleep from her eyes. Arlo stretched beside her and leaned over to see. It was a crayon sketch, the house, a tree with hearts hanging from it, 3 stick figures, and a banner above them. Love stayed. Destiny bit her lip. "You're really proud of that title, huh?" Amma beamed. "It's true, right?" Arlo pulled Amma into bed with them. "Yeah, it's true." Destiny wrapped an arm around both of them and whispered, "This time, love didn't run. It stayed." She looked at Arlo. "And so did he. If you believe in second chances and love that matures, drop your favorite line from this story in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to believe again.